Welcome to Veterans of the North. I'm your host, Trent Dilks, and we're continuing our series talking to different veterans from different eras of service. Today, I am joined by John Baker, United States Marine, and a Gulf War veteran. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Trent. It's an honor to be here today. I feel like I owe DAV to come down and do this. So I'm a lifetime member of DAV.
Yeah, well, full disclosure, John was on a trip, a wonderful trip. We actually talked about it in a previous podcast. Headed out to Glacier National Park. He got a chance to come out there with us and hike.
Had to keep the bears away from you.
Yeah, well, that's for the bears' safety, not mine. Yeah, always good to do. So, John, let's talk a little bit about your service. So, what led you to the Marine Corps?
Well, and thanks again. This is an honor to be here to do this, talk about this. I, don't always like talking about my service. I like hearing about other people's service. But I come from a long line of service. My grandfather was a soldier who fought in World War I. I've got his dog tags, and my grandfather's name was John Baker.
Okay.
And he fought in all the famous battles in World War I. As a matter of fact, he came back home and died at the age of 50 from the gas, as we used to call it.
Yeah, yep.
When I was younger, a lot of the and I grew up in St. Cloud. In the St. Cloud VA. I went to high school right across the street from the St. Cloud VA, Apollo High School. But when I grew up, all the veterans that were there were World War I veterans. So the gas was the thing.
Yeah.
And so my grandfather got mustard gas poisoning. My father was a Marine, fought in Korea, and my uncle was also a Marine. And so I grew up with some pretty strong Marine influence. My grandfather passed away before I was born, but had heard a lot about my grandfather, and so my father was a Marine, and so I went to Apollo High School. I was not a stellar student. I was a highly underachiever in high school. I mostly partied. When I graduated high school, I continued the party. I went to work. My father was an executive at Zurich Corporation in Sartell.
Yep.
And so I said, "Hey, Dad, can you get me a job?" And he got me a job. Of course, the worst job at the plant was in the iron foundry, grinding iron castings. And so I did that for almost a year, and I hated it. And I continued to drink. And one day I got a DWI.
Okay.
In Waite Park.
Yeah.
I got pulled over in Waite Park, and I remember Judge Bernard Bolin, who was fairly new on the bench at that time, asked me before sentencing. I pled guilty. I knew. Of course, this was 1980, 81. DWI laws were very, very different back then.
Yeah.
But it was still, you could still go to jail. And the judge asked me if I had anything else to say before he sentenced me. And I said, "Yes, Your Honor. I just joined the Marine Corps. I leave in a couple days."
Okay.
And judge looked at me and said, "Good. I don't want to see your ass around here for a long time." and I'll just, so I won't forget, I will tell, there's a full circle story to that.
Yeah.
30 years later, I appeared in front of Judge Bolin as a lawyer.
As a lawyer.
Representing a veteran. Of course, Judge Bolin didn't retire. Didn't remember me at all. Of course, I knew him. And I didn't, because of the way the court was that day, I didn't have a chance to tell him that story. But I like to tell that story that, I got in trouble. I joined the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps straightened me out. Became a lawyer after I served 22 years in the Marine Corps, and I was in front of Judge Bolin.
Yeah,
all those years later.
That's a great full circle story.
So it was literally jail or the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
And so I just trying to figure out. I tried to go to college back in those days. I tried to go to St. Cloud State. It just didn't work.
Yeah.
partying just way too much, and so I joined the Marine Corps, and it, to me there was only one branch
Yeah.
to join. And back in those days, the recruiting office was right next to Crossroads Center. There was a building right off Highway 15 between Sears and it's gone now, but that's where the recruiting office was. I walked in, and the recruiter looked at me, signed me up. I went open contract. I said, I just want to join the Marine Corps.
Okay.
I want to get out of here.
So what job do you end up getting?
So I, went to Marine Corps boot camp
Yep.
in San Diego, and in the Marine Corps at the end of boot camp, it's literally like the movie Full Metal Jacket, where at the end of boot camp, they put you in an auditorium and they yell your name and tell
Yep.
you, congratulations, you're infantry. Congratulations, you're a communicator. All of that. And so initially I was infantry.
Okay.
I ultimately retired as an admin chief in the Marine Corps, and that's a function of, as I went up in rank and, got put in the office and was running things and, if I wanted to stay in, and back in those days in the 90s, if you wanted to stay in, you had to go with what the Marine Corps wanted. So initially I was infantry.
Yeah. That's kind of the time of up or out, right? You
Yep.
had to find a spot, or you
Yep.
had to move,
Yep.
make your way
Yeah.
out. And I suppose, so 20 years, so you stayed in until, when did you get out? 2000?
So I did my initial 4 years. My first duty station was Hawaii.
Okay. Rough.
That was very rough. And I got out after my first 4 years, came back home, tried to do the St. Cloud State thing again, but the problem was I was still drinking.
Okay.
And it didn't work again, and so I went. Fortunately, I stayed in the reserves, so
Yeah.
my time continued to go. But then I went back on active duty. And,
Okay.
I ended up spending 22 years, combination of reserves and active duty. And, so I retired in. You're going to challenge me here. I retired in 2000. I think it was January 2003.
Okay. All right.
It's been over 20 years since I
So
retired now.
your career kind of spanned that time. There's
Yep.
the downsizing of the post-golf. We're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but
Yep.
post-golf, there's the downsizing of the armed
big
forces.
big time downsizing.
Yeah.
I mean, you could retire at 15 years back in like 95, and then we were going through the bracks where they were cutting all the bases and stuff like that. I did a lot of work on that stuff.
I had a veteran come into my office early on in my career with the DAV, who in the 90s had been offered, I think it was $50,000. He was 18 years in service. They offered him $50,000 to get out right now. And while he was telling me that story, he was an E7, and I just kind of jotted down the numbers and real quick, even figuring out if he was at 50% pay, and he left millions on the table.
He
30 years later at 50% E7 pay.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were doing that, and he thought, I'll take this 50,000. I'll go home. I'll take off from there. This is going to be my seed money, and unfortunately, it did not work out for him, and it was just kind of a disaster.
I will tell you, it's one of the best decisions I ever made was to stay in and to hit my retirement, because now in my 62 years old and my wife just retired from her job in July. It's because we have TRICARE.
TRICARE, yeah.
It's a game changer.
There's a lot of people hanging on, especially in the reserves and the guard. TRICARE, you know, they don't get it compensated. You know that they have to pay for it, but the price is pretty low compared to anybody else.
And the coverage is incredible.
Yeah.
It's absolutely incredible. So retired at 22 years. When I retired, I came back home and finished my degree at St. Cloud State, and then I went to law school at Hamlin University School of Law, which is now Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, and then I practiced law for many years. I was a trial attorney. I primarily represented veterans.
Okay.
In the criminal justice system, as well as veterans preference, a variety of things. I started veteran courts. I chaired the initiative to start veteran courts in 2008, 2009. A guy by the name of Washington County attorney, the late Pete Orpid, who was also a Marine Corps veteran. He was a prosecutor, and it was kind of easy for Pete and I to go to the Chief Justice back in those days and say, hey, Chief Justice, we've got a proposal. We want to set up this veteran court, and it helped that we were both Marine veterans.
Yep.
And, now we've had veteran courts in Minnesota, or veteran court protocol, as I call it, for quite a few years now. I'm pretty proud of that.
So let's jump back a little bit in
Sure.
time, though. Let's go back. We're probably talking about 1990. Is that when
1990? Yeah.
What's that like? Because first there's Desert Shield, right? That's
Desert
the
Shield,
buildup
Desert
of
Storm, yeah.
1 million troops throughout the Middle East. Saddam Hussein has invaded Kuwait. Desert Shield sets up. I think we got people in Saudi Arabia and countries around there.
That's where we were.
Okay,
Yep.
you're at Saudi Arabia.
Yep. So I was with I was on what's called instructor duty in New Orleans, which was a fun place to be, especially if you were a partier. And drank and,
another rough assignment.
Yeah, another rough assignment. So I was on the INI staff with 323, as we call it, part of 4th Marine Division, and 323. When Saddam went into Kuwait, and then President Bush, activated all these troops and sent all these active duty troops, and then activated all these reserve and guardsmen, and so 323 was one of the Marine Corps reserve units that got called up. We got called up and took all of our companies with our battalion to Camp Lejeune, as it's called now, and we filled in at that time in the Marine Corps. I'm not sure if the Marine Corps still does this, but they would rotate battalions, what they called UDP, Unit Deployment Program, and so one of the 8th Marines battalions was in Okinawa.
Okay.
And so 8th Marines was part of 2nd Marine Division that got sent over to Saudi Arabia. That was part of the Gulf War. And so we got attached to 8th Marines at Camp Lejeune and flew over to Saudi Arabia on Christmas Day.
Okay. All right. Christmas Day.
We went over to Saudi Arabia and got spun up and sat around there for quite a while. Of course, we had some attacks from Saddam Hussein and his forces, and we had the Patriot missiles that, of course, unfortunately, and we weren't near any of those areas that got attacked, and we lost some American troops at that time. But so we with 323, and so when Desert Storm kicked off, my unit went across the berm a couple days before, and what we were a screening unit for. In an artillery unit, part of 10th Marines, which is the 10th Marines is the Marine Corps artillery regiment, and so it was 155 millimeter howitzers back in those days, and very different howitzers compared to what you guys have nowadays. And actually, I ended up serving in an artillery unit a few years later, so I got to shoot a 155.
That's kind of my jam. I was artillery. I was a 155, but
I know you were.
I was self-propelled.
Yes.
So if we couldn't drive there, we just shoot further. We didn't.
But you still went to Fort Sill, right?
Yeah, of course.
And that's where Marines go.
Everybody goes to Fort Sill.
Yeah, that's
if
where.
If you're going to be the king of battle, you got to go to Fort Sill.
We call them gun bunnies. In the Marine Corps.
Yep. That's
so
exactly it.
We were the screening unit, and there was we ended up going through the airport and kind of around Kuwait City and through that, and it was pretty quick. What I'm proudest of is that we brought all of our Marines home.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
so I think that's kind of the picture, though, of the Desert Storm is the berm, right?
Yeah.
And it's the build up to when they're going to cross the berm, the rush through Iraq, and you're actually over there a couple days early.
We're there a couple days. Yeah, they cut a hole through the berm, and we went through it at night, and we had a pretty long convoy, and again setting up. We didn't push that far in, but we were setting up screening unit to protect our artillery guys so they wouldn't be attacked.
So what's that push like? How far in do you make it Because this all happens quick, right? The Desert Storm is from invasion to pause.
Trent, this is 33 years ago, so you're challenging my memory a little bit. I had to kind of go back, and last night as I was preparing for this, I had to think, okay, what happened? How did all this play out? And so my memory is a little bit foggy. So bear with me. We didn't. I don't recall. I don't recall how many kilometers that we went in, but we went in quite a ways. We were on our log train, our logistics train was pretty long, and I wasn't with the frontline infantry. We sent most of our mortars and our snipers and our frontline infantry guys in first. I was mostly in the rear with the gear.
Yeah, well,
as we were going forward,
the logistics of that, and I especially I was like I like to call it golf too, and so I've looked a lot at the history, and the logistics of Desert Storm were terrific.
Yeah,
like you fast forward to the reinvasion of Iraq, and there's actually a time where they almost stopped the invasion because they hadn't figured out the logistics correctly. And so you had troops actively engaged that had outrun the logistics line the second time. So the value of the proper logistics, I mean, you can't outrun them. You can't outrun your beans and bullets.
And so, I retired right before the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
Which I gotta say it wasn't what I wanted to do. I would, and my unit got called up.
Yeah.
And I was going through a med board at that time too. So I med boarded and retired at the same time.
Yeah.
So I will tell you, I watched and read and followed every part of that march up. And so, I know how difficult that was. We moved pretty fast as well, but I felt like our logistics was pretty good, and it was short enough that we didn't outrun our logistics as it was. And of course, we didn't have quite the. We had soft side Humvees.
Yeah.
So I mean, in the initial fight march up into Baghdad, a lot of soft sided Humvees. There were a lot of up armored, but we were soft side Humvees.
Yeah.
When I first came in the Marine Corps, we had Jeeps, open Jeeps. So we had no armor, no protection, anything like that. So
and that's I don't know. I knew about the logistics of Desert Storm because the Army did a really odd thing. The Army's historian actually did kind of a review of the Iraq War too, of Operation Iraqi Freedom while it was still going on. And some of the lessons learned. And at one point, some of the leading generals had actually called for a pause. And so there's leaders on the front line who are saying, "What are you talking about? We can't pause."
Yeah.
And there's these logistics leaders in the back demanding that they stop so they can figure out fuel, bullets, and beans. And it was just a nightmare. So the logistics of Desert Storm were superior. It was well lined up. And I think that's something that's kind of overlooked.
Yeah.
If you outrun your fuel, you're in a bad place.
I know.
It becomes real important.
Yeah.
So Desert Storm wraps up. How long are you there before you get to rotate back? Is it pretty quick?
So we sat on Hill 99 for about 3 months afterwards.
Okay.
So that was a hill outside of Kuwait City, just to protect Kuwait City, and then. Gosh, I think challenging my memory again here. I can't remember the exact date that we came back, but it was about 3 months. So February, March, April, May. I think it was end of April, May that we came back home.
Okay. All right.
And it was a tremendous, there were flag-lined streets and people celebrating us coming back home. And it was, still feel guilty about that, the way we were treated royally, and you guys were treated very well. But you know who treated us royally?
Is the Vietnam vets.
Vietnam vets, yeah.
Any chance I get to make that speech, I give that speech. That everything that our generations got, everything that the warm welcome, the parades, the thank yous in the airports, that is because of what the Vietnam vets went through.
I just had goosebumps.
Yeah.
From that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, it's. all when I joined the Marine Corps, all my drill instructors and NCOs and company commanders, they were all Vietnam vets.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, my gunnies were Vietnam vets, and yeah.
So in our last couple minutes here, we're going to jump back now.
Yeah.
We've before we got to the Desert Storm, you've graduated law school. You worked with veterans. You are kind of the father of veterans treatment protocol for the courts here in Minnesota. What did you take from the Marine Corps, from those experiences that helped you succeed in those ways? What kind of translated for your next great thing?
We have a saying in the Marine Corps: "Embrace the suck."
Embrace the suck. Yeah.
I learned to do difficult things.
Yeah.
I learned to do difficult things in the Marine Corps. And suffer. I learned to suffer. And I'm an endurance athlete as well.
Yeah.
So, I love to suffer. And, I go on a 100-mile bicycle ride and I love to suffer. So it taught me how to suffer, but how to use that in a positive way to move forward. But I also, especially as I've aged, learned how to be kind to myself.
Yeah.
You gotta, I always say, you gotta, in this day and age, we gotta treat each other with grace and kindness. Well, we gotta do that to ourselves too.
Internally, we will say stuff to ourselves that we would never say to our worst enemy. Yep. And that negative self-talk is poison. It really is. If you wouldn't say it to the person you like the least in this world, why are you saying it to yourself?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So the Marine Corps taught me, how to, law school was not easy.
Yeah.
It was a hard thing to do, and to get through it taught me that I could get through it. But then the Marine Corps gave me the credibility to do all the work, and 20 years of being a lawyer. I taught de-escalation to police officers all over the country, and then I became a professor. I was a tenured professor at St. Cloud State.
Okay.
And was able to teach cops, but I couldn't have done any of that without the Marine Corps. Also, I got to say this because this is key. I talked a lot about how I partied and I drank.
Yeah.
When we came back from the first Gulf War, that's all we did.
Yeah.
And so my battalion commander, I knocked on his door one day and I said, "Sir, I need help." And he said, and I was a sergeant at that time, Sergeant Baker, whatever you need.
Yeah.
And so I went to an inpatient treatment program, 8-week inpatient treatment program at Corpus Christi Naval Hospital, and I haven't drank since.
Oh, that's so.
So it's 33 years that I've been sober.
Yeah, and the strength.
Yeah.
We talk about that. We talk about it with mental health. We talk about it with substance abuse. That is an absolute show of strength. It is so hard. And I think people are afraid when they have to come out and when you share your story and when people right now, veterans, have to come out and ask for help, that it's going to be seen as weakness. Absolutely not. I see that as the hardest, most strength showing, just enduring thing that a person can do. And congratulations on your sobriety.
Thank you for that. And I go to the old adage of you're down in the hole, and why does that the last person you talk to jump down in the hole with you?
Yep.
Because now you're both stuck, and the other person says, "Well, I've been here before. I know how to get out.
I know the way out."
And so that gave me credibility working with many of the veterans that I represented over many years. I represented murder cases down to DWIs, domestic violence, all kinds of cases.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time it was good people that, but for their military experience, they wouldn't be in the position that they're in. And so.
And we got to look at the whole person when we're looking at not just one moment.
And alcohol and drug abuse was a huge component to that. So.
And then I think for wrapping it up here, people that are leaving right now, they're looking for their, we had talked a little bit before, and it was from a place that I was a mentor at a PTSD camp, and it was, don't let serving your country be the last great thing you do. And so as people, if one of our listeners is leaving the service right now, or is still trying to adjust after service, what advice would you give them as they look for their next great thing?
Well, let me say this, Trent, and as a retired senior enlisted guy, I always say one of the hardest days of my life was the day after I retired, because I couldn't be a gunny in the Marine Corps anymore.
Yeah.
I couldn't lead troops, but I always say, especially the retired veterans, senior enlisted guys or officers, we have an even more obligation now to continue to work for our veterans, because we have a position that of credibility that we can. That's why I work, lobby in front of the legislature and Congress for veteran issues, because I have the credibility. I have an obligation to you, Trent, to continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
To the soldiers and sailors, airmen, Marines that were after me, to continue to do that.
Don't let your mission end. Don't let your purpose end.
That's what I say is we serve, but we still have an obligation to help each other as veterans, and we need each other. And we're not constrained by the military anymore, so we can do what we want.
Yeah. Yep.
and you know that better than anybody.
Yep.
With the work that you've done, and I say we have it. Whether you join the DAV and just pay membership fees and help their mission, or join one of the other service organizations, or become a veteran court mentor, or something like that, we have an obligation to our fellow service members to continue to do that, bar none.
Absolutely.
Because nobody else is going to do that.
No one else.
No one else.
Well, John, thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom. It sounds like your mission continues, and we wish you the best of luck with that.
Thanks, Trent.
All right. This has been Veterans of the North. You can find us where all podcasts are posted. I'm not sure where that is, but it's all over the place.